The action bar in our application is very useful because we can create our own menu items up here. And so for instance, if I click the more icon over here, I can see the menu expand to allow for settings, which currently is not coded to do anything. In this lesson, I want to go ahead and create one that's going to allow us to close our application and completely close it out rather than leaving it running in the background. So to do that, I need to switch back over to the code. And what I want to look for now is in the menus folder. So if I open or expand the resources folder and look in the menu folder, I'll find this main.xml. I'm going to go ahead and double click that. And I'll go ahead and switch over to the XML code rather than just being here within the graphical mode. And I can see that I currently have one item that is on my menu. It is actually the settings item I just referred to. And you can see here that the ID is called action settings. And then you can see that it also refers to a string called action settings, which is going to contain that word settings that we had seen. I want to go ahead and create a new item. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter below here. And I'm just going to go ahead and type in an item tag to start with. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And you'll notice that it adds the closing part of my item tag. I'm going to space that down. And let's go ahead and begin adding some attributes. The first attribute that I want to add is Android, and then the ID. And let's go ahead and in double quotes, we're going to go ahead and say the @ plus ID / action _ exit. And I'll go ahead and end that with a double quote. And it looks like I forgot to put the equal sign, so let's go ahead and do that. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and space down that closing tag. The next attribute is going to be another Android, show as action. I'll go ahead and double click that. And we're going to go ahead and say if room. And if you take a look up here, you can see that the show as action for this item is never, which means it's never going to be shown on our action bar. It's always going to be hidden away. Ours is going to show it if there is currently room on the action bar, meaning typically if I'm in landscape mode or if I'm working on a very large device that has a very large action bar to work with, then it's going to go ahead and show this item. I'll go ahead and space down after this. And let's go ahead and give it a title. Android, title. And let's go ahead and I'm just going to hard code in here the word exit. And I'll go ahead and save this page. That way it updates it in all the code. Now let's go ahead and switch over to the main activity.java file. Now if I look at the code here, I can see on my line 17, I've got this method called onCreateOptionsMenu. This is going to load in the items that are on the main XML file. And so you can see here it's referring to resources menu, which is going to be the menu folder, and then main, which is our main XML. So this is actually going to be loading it up into the action bar for us. And I'm going to go ahead now and create a new method that's going to allow us to write code if one of those items is actually selected. Let's go ahead and begin by doing public boolean, and then this is going to be called on options item selected. And I'll go ahead and open up parenthesis, and inside of here I'm going to go ahead and say menu item, and I'm just going to call it item. And then I'll have an opening curly brace here, and if I hit enter, it'll end that curly brace. I am going to need to hover over the menu item and import it into our activity. And if I hover over the method, it's going to want a return statement for this one because I don't have void on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say add return statement. And now let's go ahead and add some code. I'm going to space down the return statement. And I'll start off by putting in a line comment so that we know what this method is used for. I'll just say handle presses on the action bar item. So we're going to handle any of the presses or clicks on the action bar items. Now let's go ahead and use a switch statement. Switch. We're going to go ahead and use the item ID for the menu item that was selected up here. So item dot get item ID, and I'll go ahead and make sure I've got all my code here. Opening, closing parenthesis, and I've got an opening and closing parenthesis. That switch statement's now going to need an opening curly brace, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. And if I hover over the get item ID, I have a capital D here, so I've got a little bit of an error. Let's go ahead and change that. There we go, get item ID. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the item that was selected, which is going to be our menu item here called item, and we're going to check to see which item was actually selected by getting the ID of that item. So now we need to set up the case for this. So let's go ahead and set up the case. Case r.id.action. Now the one I just created was called action_exit. And I'll go ahead and put a colon there, and I'll space down. And now the code that I actually want to execute if this item is selected is just to finish. So we'll type in super.finish, and we'll go ahead and use the opening and closing parenthesis and a colon. I'm also going to go ahead and return back here true. Return true, and that'll be a semicolon, and then break to end it. Let's go ahead and do another case. Case r.id. Let's go ahead and do settings, action settings, and then a colon. I have no code here yet for the settings menu. I'll just go ahead and put a space down, and I'll just go ahead and return true, semicolon, and then break, semicolon. And because I am returning it, I actually do not need the break statement, so I can remove those. I'm getting the error here to remove them, so let's go ahead and remove those. And now let's go ahead, instead of a case, let's just do a default. I'll do a colon, hit enter, and then return back to the method super.on items on options item selected, and I'll just go ahead and double click it up here, and then the item that was selected. That's what I'll return back, and end that with a semicolon. If I scroll down, I no longer need the return statement here. Let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, and we have the basic setup for our switch statement to handle each one of those items that are selected from the menu. So I'm going to use a switch. Anytime I add additional items to my menu in the main.xml, I'm going to want to go ahead and create a case for it, just like I did here for the action exit. If I want to write code for the settings button, I would write it here. And this gives us a good structure to work with for selecting menu items. So if I go ahead now and save my application and then run it in the emulator, okay, now that the application is loaded up, you can see that I have the word exit in here, and I also have the ability to find settings by clicking on the more option. And there's settings. Now to test to see if our code works, I'm going to go ahead and click on exit, and our application has exited. So we have successfully put in a menu item to our application in the action bar, and we've successfully executed code based on a click event of that item.